Yo, it ain't us. Why are we taking the rap for stuff we're not even doing? Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. This is Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek. Hey, I had a wonderful weekend. I hope you did too. I'm so excited to be here. Had a blast this weekend. I spent most of Saturday and Sunday with my family and my kids playing around. And we got to go to the park and go to a place here in Miami that it's in a mall. And it's kind of like a big, giant facility full of bounce houses. And my daughter loves to go there. Now, my son, he's not too into that. He'd rather play, with a stick and dirt than go to one of those places. He's a lot like me. But I was having a blast with him, wrestling on the couch on Saturday. And I pinned him down, and, he got all honked off and kicked me in the face. And so I took and, bit him in the toe. And he limps off the room, just mumbling something, Papa, He doesn't talk very clearly yet. I mean, he's only 17 months old. But, we had a blast, and he loves to play with me. He already knows where my van is, and he sees it coming up, and he's all Papa everywhere, and Papa this and Papa that. And my wife is going insane because, she's the one that spends all day with him, feeding him and clothing him and taking him everywhere, and all she hears all day is Papa, 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 Papa. So she's about lost it. But all good. Just having a ton of fun here and enjoying this podcast. Hey, if you have questions for the Pest Geek, we're getting a lot of emails and we're getting a lot of questions online and over social media. But if you would like to participate in the podcast, would you do me a favor? Instead of sending us an email or online or, just go to the phone, dial 707-395-7378 and leave a recorded voicemail. And that line is available 24/7. It's the question line. And we can then use that question on the air to help other people. But I'd rather just let somebody hear the question than me reading off emails all day long. And so it'd be great if you could just call us on that phone number. The number again is 707-395-7378, 24/7. Call from any cell phone. It's free. And you can just leave us a voicemail. We'd greatly appreciate that. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter by looking up at Pest Geek Podcast, all one word, and on the web at pestgeekpodcast.com. And this podcast is sponsored by Audible. If you like listening to great content, you're going to love audiobooks by Audible. And you can get a free month and a free download, and that will help support the podcast by going to audibletrial.com/pestgeek. And I want to talk to you about this topic called Yo, It Ain't Us, and why we are all over the news, blogs, and getting just flack from all the environmental watchdog groups for the application of pesticides and causing cancer in children, contaminating groundwater, polluting lakes and streams. But has anybody really asked who's really doing this? And what happens is that, PMPs are like the poster child for the pesticide industry or the pest control industry. We're responsible for contaminating all of the environment and, causing cancer and applying pesticides everywhere. But when you look at the facts, when you look at the numbers, we're less than 1% of all the pesticides applied in the U.S. And why is this? Well, because most people's experience with pesticides is either going to the hardware store, to the big local home improvement store, and buying a pesticide and applying it themselves, or dealing with a pest control operator or a PMP when the only experience people ever have with pesticides is watching the trucks go down the street with these big, 100 and 200 gallon tanks and a spray rig in the back, and pest control trucks are all over the place. Well, we must be contaminating all of the environment. And the reality is that nothing could be further from the truth. Again, we're less than 1%. And we're going to do is we're going to look at the body of evidence, not from, from environmental groups, blogs, but we're going to go directly to the EPA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Geological Survey, and look at the evidence of how much pesticide is being applied and who's applying it. And you're going to be shocked that, it ain't us. So let's do this. Who's doing all the spraying? Well, let's look at what the USDA says about pesticides. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says approximately 877 million pounds of active ingredients were pumped into the ground in 2007 on our crops. Well, the good news is it went down from 1.1 billion pounds or 1,100,000,000 pounds of active ingredient when compared to 1980. That is awesome. Pesticide usage is actually down in agriculture. 877 million pounds was pumped into the ground in agriculture in the United States alone. The worldwide estimate, it's somewhere around 5.4 billion pounds worldwide pumped into the ground. The most common pesticide that is used in agriculture is glyphosate, aka Roundup. It accounts for about half of all the pesticide applied in the U.S. And that is directly from the USDA. I have links to all this, by the way. If you want to go to pestgeekpodcast.com, if you're listening to this, there should be links in the notes for you to be able to link to the data and see it for yourself that, I'm not exaggerating. The USDA use and pesticide markets is the page that it's on, and you can get that link there. Now, here's the other issue. So now it's in agriculture, 877 million pounds. But the EPA also estimates 70 million pounds of pesticides are applied to residential and landscape lawns by homeowners. So 70 million is about the estimate used around the country for lawns. In a survey performed, between 20 and 90% of residents reported using a pesticide. And this is from the EPA on the outreach for stormwater impact. Now, a specific study was done in California, and it revealed that over 50% of the residents had treated their own homes in the last 6 months with a pesticide. And it said that 40 to 60% didn't even follow label directions exactly. In other words, if a resident buys a pesticide and he goes to the big hardware store and he buys a pesticide, he doesn't even read the label. He just applies. If it says use 2 ounces, he'll use 4 because he says, this stuff is watered down. Twice is just as good or better. 42 to 55% were purchased. Guess what? At the largest home improvement stores. The study also revealed that only between 11 and 17% of California residents hired a professional pest control person to perform outdoor pest control, which that is consistent with all the marketing information that we have, that we are about only 20% of the market. And in lawn and ornamental pest control, it's much less. It's less than 10%. Because most of the pest control companies out there are structural pest control. Very few are doing lawn and ornamental pest control. Here's the worst part. It gets worse. 5% to 15% admitted to pouring pesticides down the drain or outside in the storm drain. I mean, we would get crucified if we even did that. And yet the majority of the pesticide you're going to find in the water was pumped down the drain by homeowners. Another study showed that about 150,000 homes in the U.S. still have products like DDT in their home. Still, like in their shed, it's there. All right, so again, who's doing all the contamination? Well, this is going to shock you. But if you take that 70 million pounds, I mean, I am not a mathematician or I'm not brilliant, but I can add and subtract, divide, multiply, and use fractions. And if you take that 11 to 17% estimated of pest control PMPs doing actual pest control, and you take the 70 million estimated pounds, that's only 7.7 to 11.9 million pounds of active ingredient at the highest that we're putting into the ground, that we're putting in the air, that we're putting on lawns, that we're putting around property. I mean, if we take the responsibility for the total pesticide applied in the U.S., and you take that 877 million pounds of pesticide that's being applied, it's 0.88% to 1.36% at the 17% highest that we're pumping into the ground. Less than 1%. We're responsible for putting into the ground, for putting into lakes, for putting into streams, for putting into the groundwater. Like I said in the beginning, yo, it ain't us. Now, this source is, I have a link to the source, which is the University of UC Davis, their IPM program, and you can get the link directly to this. Why is this important? Because, listen, nobody out there is putting this information out. Every single blog you read about contamination is written by some environmentalist group, but they never ever really point to the source of the contamination. And we get lumped in to all this when we're actually, the PMPs are actually the lowest contributor to less than 1%. And nobody is talking about this. I don't hear this coming out of the National Pest Management Association. I don't hear it coming out of any blog by any of the regional pest management, the state pest management association. Nobody is defending us on this, saying, look, it ain't us. You need to look somewhere else. So when a place like Maryland puts a ban on all cosmetic pesticides, it's less than 1%. Why didn't they go after the homeowners directly? Why didn't they go after the agriculture? Why did they specifically target lawns and cosmetic when it's not even 1% of the pesticide applied in that state? Why? Because they know they can't take on the agricultural industry, so you might as well take on the little guy. You take the least offender and you make him an example. But wait, it gets worse. This is not even to mention all of the landscapers illegally applying pesticides to the landscape. Here's why. When you hear the word pesticide, immediately in most people's mind, what they hear is an insecticide, something that kills an insect. People think of a pesticide and an insecticide synonymously. And a pesticide is anything that kills anything that is undesirable. Bleach can be a pesticide. You can apply 20% bleach and a solution of bleach in water, and it's a pesticide to kill weeds. You can use vinegar at 20 to 10% solution, and it's a pesticide. It's inorganic, it's natural, but it's still a pesticide. And glyphosate, aka Roundup, is being applied by landscapers all over the country illegally. because they don't have a pesticide license to apply Roundup or glyphosate to the ground. And they're applying it like it's going out of style. Like, there's an Armageddon on glyphosate. By the way, guys, you better buy and apply all you can while you still have it. And that accounts for the majority of the pesticides being pumped into the ground. And it's not even by us, it's by landscapers. Applying it illegally. By the way, when was the last time you saw a landscaper who went out and bought a truck, went to a large, store and purchased all his landscape equipment, went down to the city, got his license, and then the next day he was in business with no training, no certification, no protective equipment, no MSDS. He doesn't even understand the label, doesn't know what's on it, has never read it, and yet he's applying pesticides all over the place. And nobody is saying anything about that. Like I said, it ain't us. Let's talk about water and air pollution. This is not me saying this. This is not an environmental group. This is the U.S. Geological Survey who is doing these tests. And according to the USGS, they've investigated 51 streams in 9 states in the Midwest in order to determine the presence of a wide range of herbicides and their degradation and byproducts and antibiotics in the water. In 154 water samples they collected, glyphosate was detected in 36% of those samples. There's a link to that, by the way, that study, that you can get it on our website. How much glyphosate has been pumped into the ground? Well, between 1987 and 2007, an estimated 80,000 metric tons of glyphosate were used per year in the United States. Per year. The problem is the EPA does not do real environmental impact studies on glyphosate. It doesn't really know how much glyphosate is actually in our ground, getting into our groundwater. Why? Because due to technical difficulties of measuring it, at measuring glyphosate concentrations relevant to the environmental studies, it's very difficult to do. Yet glyphosate is widespread in the environment. It's in our drinking water. And the EPA has said it's in our drinking water. There's a link to that. It's proven to cause kidney damage and reproductive effect in long-term exposures. Here you have farmers, landscapers applying this product to the ground, and they don't even know the long-term exposure problems with glyphosate. I mean, I don't know when, as a pest control operator, I applied glyphosate to a landscape. But it ain't us. It's in our food. The EPA has said how much is in there. No one really knows because testing is very expensive. This is comical. This is according to Reuters. Reuters wrote this article. We don't know how much glyphosate is in your water, and we don't know how much is in the ground, and we don't know how much is in the food because we can't really test it accurately, and testing is very expensive. So if our children and adults are getting cancer, could it be because they're drinking and eating it? Not because PMPs are pumping all this pesticide into the ground? And I say to you guys, once again, it ain't us. So we need to get the word out about this. We need to get the word out. Take this podcast, please. Share it on social media. Please. Give it to your customers. when everybody's worried about how you're contaminating it, let them look at the evidence that says, yo, it ain't us. Hey guys, it's been a blast. It's been real. It's been fun. I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.